In 1763, on the 10th of February, as a direct result of signing of the Treaty of Paris, which ended the French and Indian War in North America, France ceded all mainland North American territories, except New Orleans. Britain gained all territory east of the Mississippi River, and these colonies were to become America. In 1763, on October 7th, George III, weary of the cost of defining the colonies, prohibited all settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains, without guarantees of security from local Native Americans. The intervention in colonial affairs offended the 13 colonies' claim to exclusive right to govern lands in the West. This was the first offense of many that drove the 13 colonies to become an independent nation. This was the first of many acts that upset colonists into becoming America. 1 year later, the first attempt to finance the defense of the colonies began, led by the British government. This would be dubbed the Sugar Act. Although this may sound positive, due to the fact they're upset without security, this also enraged colonists. In order to deter smuggling and to encourage the production of British rum, taxes on molasses was dropped. A levy was placed on foreign wine, and colonial exports of iron, lumber, and other goods had to pass first through Britain and British customs. After another year, Britain was seeking to defray some of the costs of garrisoning the colonies. Parliament required all legal documents, newspapers, and pamphlets required use as watermarked or stamped paper on which a levy was placed as a result. Colonial assemblies required to pay for supplies to British garrisons. The New York Assembly argued that it cannot be forced to comply. This was one of the many seeds of rebellions. The Virginia Assembly refused to comply with the Stamp Act, which was the start of the mutual disagreement in the colonies. Representatives from 9 of the 13 colonies declared the Stamp Act unconstitutional, as it was a tax levied without their consent. This was the first organized act against British ideas or commands. In 1766, Parliament finalizes the repeal of the Stamp Act, but declares that it has the right to tax colonies, which means that Britain decided to quell ideas of rebellion. They will postpone the taxes they intended to impose. There were duties on tea, glass, lead, paper, and paint to help pay for the administration of colonies. Colonial assemblies condemned taxation without representation. This was a big move that was postponed 1 year before, but enraged colonists like Dickinson all the same. British troops arrived in Boston in response to political unrest. This just angered colonists further, which led to the Boston Massacre. Angered by the presence of troops in Boston's colonial policy, a crowd began harassing a group of soldiers guarding the customs house. A soldier was knocked down by a snowball and discharged his musket, sparking a volley into the crowd, which killed 5 civilians. The repeal of the Townshend Revenue Act was another attempt at getting the people in order, especially after the Boston Massacre. In an effort to support the ailing East India Company, Parliament exempted its tea from import duties and allowed the company to sell its tea directly to the colonies. Americans resented what they saw as an indirect tax subsidizing a British company. This leads to one of the most famous moments in the Revolution. Angered by the Tea Acts, American patriots disguised as Mohawk Indians and dumped $9,000 worth of tea into the Boston harbor, and this leads to equally legendary and tolerable acts. In 1774, those measures which stripped Massachusetts of its self-government and traditional independence following the Boston Tea Party. The colonies responded with a general boycott of British goods, and this eventually leads to the Revolutionary War breaking out. In 1775, on the 19th of April, there were the first engagements of the Revolutionary War between British troops and the Minutemen. Minutemen are simple, untrained militia, but Britain's strongest army on the planet at this time. On the 16th of June, the Continental Congress appointed George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, and they issued 2 million bills of credit to fund the army. On June 17, 1775, was the day of the first major battle of the War of Independence. Sir William Hull dislodged William Prescott's forces that overlooked Boston and commanding 1,054 British casualties to Americans 267. This raised the morale of soldiers everywhere, and was the first hinting of a chance of colonial victory. Congress endorses a proposal asking for the recognition of the American rights, the ending of the Intolerable Acts in exchange for a ceasefire. George III rejected the proposal and on August 23, 1775, declared the colonies to be an open rebellion. In 1776, Thomas Paine's Common Sense was published anonymously in Philadelphia, and this is the catalyst to the war, and by this point, with this book, everybody had decided if they should remain loyal or rebel. On May 2nd, 1776, France provided covert aid to the Americans, dramatically shifting the momentum of the war and giving the new America a legitimate fighting chance. On the 4th of July, in 1776, the Continental Congress issues a Declaration of Independence, and by extension, forces people to acknowledge them as a nation. With France at their back and a constitution, they seemed like they would never stay with Britain, even if they lost this war. The next might be different. This was also the first 4th of July. The final major battle of the war was the Battle of Yorktown, and the result was that the British forces had surrendered under Cornwallis in Yorktown. The Treaty of Paris has ended the Revolutionary War.